This past week, there were a lot of exciting announcements in the Pebble community. That is specifically that they are going to be making new hardware. And if you're anything like me, this is the Fitbit Versa 4. There's nothing that's really replaced the Pebble in terms of battery life. This has 4 days of battery life. I particularly don't need like app notifications on my smartwatch. I mostly just want fitness tracking, call notifications, and some access to like weather apps and like basic information, and something with a very good battery life. And there's really nothing in the smartwatch community, even in the past 10 years, that has really come close to what Pebble had. And Eric Migikovsky made an announcement last week that they will be making new hardware, and he's built some sites. I'll link all this information below for developers.
I decided to start making new Pebble watch hardware that will run Pebble OS. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time, whereas last time we did it as kind of a prototypical startup. We raised money, built out a big team, had up to 100 plus people working at Pebble. It taught me a lot about how to build a sustainable operation. And this time around, I think the number one goal is how do we build this in a sustainable manner? And I mean that sustainable in that we will continue building hardware long into the future and continue being able to support the operating system and update it and publish new features and that kind of thing.
But basically, Google bought Fitbit at some point, and then Fitbit bought Pebble, I believe. And in the past year, he worked with the team of people that he knows there to get the code to be open source. And now there's a GitHub repository. All of this is kind of coming full circle and reopening the market for the Pebble, Repebble, as they have their website named. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the info we've seen and a live stream that he did, and kind of discuss some of the stuff. I knew there was a reason I kept some of these watches. So I never had the Pebble 1, which was a kind of plastic enclosure, but I did get the Pebble steel hereafter. And this was a really kind of nice entrance to the smartwatch world, where it was just kind of premium feeling. The silver one they had looked really cool actually too. It has the tactile buttons, no touch screen, so you're not always like fiddling around trying to find things because they are small screens. It's just very simple to use with the tactile buttons. And you could kind of get some different watch bands as well. And then was the Pebble Time here. It had a round interface. Similarly, had a reflective LCD. By the way, these are not e-ink. They are reflective LCDs. They call them like memory LCDs. They do have generally pretty good battery life, but they are doing refreshes. It's not like e-ink where it's bistable. And so the time I did like, but the circle was a little bit small. See the bezel's kind of big here. I do kind of wish that it was it filled it a little bit more. It was a cool, like pretty slick device, and at the time having like a round screen was kind of a novelty, so that was neat. But it did have steel hardware and felt relatively premium overall as well. And then came one of the coolest ones in my opinion, which was the Pebble Time Steel here. They had a few different colorways, but this just integrated all the kind of best. You can see the screen is pretty much identically sized here. But instead of being a monochrome screen, it did have color. It's not the most like color accurate, but I'll just flip through here so you can see a little bit. But it added some vibrancy and was cool in certain apps when you were trying to customize things. If I move it towards the light, you can see how it's kind of reflective. The backlight is not on right now. Or if I move it to the window, you can see it has that vibrancy. Like this has 4-day battery life, which is like okay, but there really isn't much out there that's better. I know some of the Garmin's are, but they don't really have the best interface or app support. And so this is pretty exciting news in my opinion, and really looking forwards to seeing what they come out with and seeing what new developers can create for this open source code now. Also, having like physical tactile buttons is pretty undervalued in my opinion, and just really nice for like when you want to just change simple songs and not be scrolling through an interface on your watch.
What made Pebble special though is, and I guess we could chat about this more, also coincidentally the reason why I think it's time to bring it back. So what made Pebble a Pebble was its e-paper screen, which is a low power, always on, daylight readable, reflective screen rather than emissive, which pushes light out of it. There's e-paper, long battery life, lasted for a week plus, fairly simple feature set. Like we didn't try to boil the ocean and do everything that your phone could do. Um, Focused on things like notifications, telling time. Who would expect your watch to be really good at telling time? Um, Music control. We had physical buttons. We have physical buttons on the watch, so you could press the button to play, pause, skip tracks. You don't have to look at a touch screen and hit the right tiny little icon. And it was hackable. Anyone who wanted could write a watch face or build an app for Pebble.
Personally, I'm hoping for some of the changes is now that we have much more miniaturization of these devices, for the devices to be slicker, the screen to be bigger. Eric even mentioned that the big bezel was one of the downfalls of the Time Steel. So perhaps we could even, with the better Bluetooth chips now, more efficient processors, and maybe even better screen tech, like if they were to put e-ink in it, for example. E-ink has come a long way since the e-paper reflective LCDs or memory LCDs that they used in the original Pebbles. So yeah, stuff like that, we could see much better battery life with the new hardware that they're going to create. Eric even mentioned in the live stream that the experience of building Pebble towards the end was a big learning experience because I think they really overestimated the demand and they had a lot of supply. And so, this is the later phase where smartwatches were becoming more of a thing and we were starting to see other models as well.
Still works perfectly. That's the crazy part. Like this watch is 8 years old, 9 years old. It hasn't had an update in 8 years, and it still works great. I think that's a testament to the quality of engineering work and product design that the Pebble team put in, between 2012 and 2016, in that it still works. Like, what other gadgets do you have from 10 years ago that you could turn on, connect to a phone?
Right.
Like, you can't. The first generation Apple Watch doesn't even work anymore.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really stood out to me.
Eric mentioned that some of the downfalls of the Time Steel that came out, the last one and the Pebble 2, those are things that they really learned from. And if they're going to make new hardware now, hopefully they can implement some of that. And, things like the Apple Watch came and dominated the market. But like I mentioned, those don't really offer the same experience as the Pebble does. They're just very connected and they have atrocious battery life where you need to charge it every day. For me, that's not what I want a watch to be. I want it to be something that tells time and is just more of a useful thing. For most things, I'd rather use my phone and not use my watch. But there are things that the watch can have a benefit for. Really looking forward to see what is going to come from the Pebble company. If you have any more info or comments, leave them below. And I'd love to hear more about your experience, or if you're a developer, what you would like to maybe develop for the new Pebble. If you want to see any of my Fitbit playlists, you can check that out here. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.